Good evening, everyone, and good evening to those of you who are joining us online tonight. My name is John, and welcome to our Discovery Wednesday class with Guy Finley. We are here at the Life of Learning Foundation in our classroom. We have a group of students here joining those of you online for our session tonight. We will, in just a minute or two, Guy will present the talk that he prepared for tonight on the topic that you see below you on the screen. And when he's through, which is usually in about 55 or 60 minutes, and after that we'll take a short break and come back for our open discussion with Guy. Q&A where those of you online and those in the room that you can ask questions and make comments about the material Guy presented or just about what you are working on right now in your interior life. And so our session tonight will last up until about 8:30, and we hope you can stay for all of that. As I said, this is Discovery Wednesday, and the format of the class is a little bit different than our other ones with Guy, and he will be very direct in inviting us to participate, and you can do so online. Just go to the question box on your GoToWebinar control panel, and you can enter comments and questions there when Guy invites you to do so, and those get relayed to him during the broadcast. And you can also send comments through the email at support@guyfinley.org. That goes to Kate, and she will also pass those on as is necessary. So you can communicate with us throughout the broadcast today, and we encourage you to do so. All right, Guy, I think we're ready to get started. Would you like me to read the topic and key lesson?
Just the topic, please. I'll read the key lesson.
All right. Here is our topic tonight, everyone. Take off the hat of unhappiness and welcome a brand new you.
So before I read the key lesson, a welcome to everyone joining us from wherever you are, whatever time, whatever day. Glad you're here. Wednesday evenings with the students who are here and with those who join us is always a special kind of evening of exploration. And you will be invited, as you'll see, as we start to dive into these ideas that we have planned for tonight, how it is that if you're willing to participate, you can begin to see things that ordinarily, by and large, we just don't see. And that's one of the big things about these Wednesday nights, is that we are constantly working to understand that the reason so little gets healed in us is because so much remains concealed in us. In fact, just before the class started, one of the students, you may not know this, those of you who join us when we start, we have a 15 minutes before class and usually 15 or 20 after class where students come up and share insights and talk about the things they do, and we have a dialogue, and it's always very helpful. And one of the students came up just before we started, and he read a quote from a beautiful, now deceased, awakened man. It was something to this effect. The only problem you have with your life is what you don't know about your inner nature. And then the end part of it was, so now you know what to do. And everybody laughed. That's what we work on here, is pulling back the curtains on an unconscious nature that has been conditioned over millennia to hide itself from any possible revelation that might release you from its grip. So here's the key lesson for tonight, and we'll take it down. Only in a world turned upside down could someone actually believe that his or her daily dose of stress, anxiety, and despair somehow proves that he or she is as special as they imagine themselves to be. Take off the hat of unhappiness and welcome a brand new you. Thank you. We can take it down. How many of you know something about the hat of unhappiness? Hands, please. I won't have time to get into it, so I'll just do this ever so quickly. The hat of unhappiness is a creation of the Mad Hatter. Now, the Mad Hatter, how many of you are familiar with that term? Principally, it comes from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. But the truth is, the Hatter was never called the Mad Hatter in the original version. But the reason that one calls it the Mad Hatter, you may not know this, a little bit of trivia for you, is that back in the 17th, 18th century, the makers of hats often went insane because they used mercury. And it would create schizophrenia, hallucinations, anxiety, outbursts, all these strange behaviors. So therefore, if you made hats in that day, you were I'm going to help you see tonight where the Mad Hatter lives in you. Well, do you not go insane from time to time, yes or no? All right. With that in mind, a big part of our work, and I can't stress it enough, and I do quite often, is the idea that our work as aspirants to, you could say it 1,000 different ways, being a decent, innocent human being someone in relationship with the divine, enlightened as the expression goes, liberated, that none of that work can take place in earnest, let alone can one receive any results from that work, unless they enter into it with the idea that they are not set upon that task in order to prove anything at all. So much of what punishes us is because we start out believing that we have to prove to ourselves what we already know is true. Like you say, I know it's true there's a God, but you don't know it's true, because if you knew it was true, you wouldn't be a Mad Hatter. So the task of the aspirant is to be someone who explores. Everything we do is to explore, and further, everything we do to explore this consciousness, this inner nature of which we know so little, includes the fact that a true explorer, that what he discovers, what she discovers in that journey is never right or wrong. It's never good or bad. No one who explores something goes into it thinking what I'm looking for. They go into it looking to learn what they can about where they are, and in retrospect, to reveal in themselves the corresponding qualities to their discoveries. So we have a completely wrong attitude about all of the things that we see in ourselves. It's why people run out of these classes literally and never come back, because suddenly, by the grace of God, they're shown something in their character, in their consciousness, that they did not know was there. And when they see it, because they have been led to that discovery, the exploration reveals something they are absolutely unaware of, and they have, oh my God, that's terrible. I wouldn't be like that if you hadn't made me look at it. And of course, that's sheer nonsense, isn't it? So keep in mind what we're going to look at tonight, and we do. We touch some sensitive spots, as we must. Things that are concealed, covered up, that have to be uncovered. Keep in mind tonight that the task we're after is to discover what is true about our consciousness, and that it is impossible for our present consciousness, the way it is, to discover anything about itself, because our present consciousness is too busy covering itself up to prove to itself and our corresponding identity that somehow what it knows is so, including that I shouldn't be like this or you ought not be like that. So you remember what we're after here is discovery, and that you'll see, and so many of you ask this question, well, what do I do with what I discover? If you discover something, the revelation of that discovery has its own action. Something we can't imagine because we're so used to trying to take action with the wrong things that we see or how we need to be right. But you will discover, if you're willing to stay the course, that there can never be something you're shown about yourself that in the veracity of it and your willingness to receive it, you won't be given a corresponding new relationship to that consciousness that was formerly governed by itself, and now awareness has brought you into a new relationship with it. Everybody ready? I set the stage. 7 minutes too long. So let's get going. I have a story to tell you. Take a nice deep breath. First part's the easy part. That's when you first see the mountain and you go, well, that doesn't look too bad. A well-known actor is visiting somewhere in New York City and talking to a well-known off-Broadway producer, because the producers invited him in to talk to him about a role for a show that he's getting ready to cast in one of the few off-Broadway theaters that exist there. And so they agree to meet at a fairly famous place. There used to be a lot of places like this. I haven't been to New York in 1,000 years, and God willing, I won't be there ever again as long as I live. No offense, New Yorkers, but I'm just not a city person, let's put it that way. And there's always these places where you can go. Here in LA, it used to be the Brown Derby, and there were certain places where celebrities went to hobnob with their kin. And all these places were pretty much the same. Big, deep leather booths, usually quite dark, a bar that was attended to by some handsome people, and the general hubbub of a place that was important because of the people that visited it. And you went there to be seen amongst them. Everybody got the picture? So our visiting would-be Broadway actor is talking to the producer, and all of a sudden there's this commotion over in a corner, and you can hear dishes crashing on the ground. You can hear somebody barking at waiters and waitresses quite cruelly, and the young actor looks to the producer and goes, what is that? I'm not used to that. What kind of commotion is that? I mean, really? What's going on? And the producer says, oh, that's just old Ernest Williams. You know that actor. Yeah, I know his name for sure. Well, the producer goes, he's been carrying on like that, making a scene really for the last several months now, just like that. You got to be kidding me. I mean, he's so respected. Isn't he the one who's been starring in The King and I for like the last 44 years on Broadway, doing 7 shows a week and 2 on Saturday? Is that the same Ernest Williams you're talking about? You got him. Well, God, I mean, what's the story here? Why is he creating so much havoc? Being rude like he is, throwing dishes? Is he drunk? No. Well, the producer said, not really drunk, but in a way, he has kind of lost his mind. How so? Producer says, frankly, I'm kind of worried about him, but I think I know what's going on. I even tried to talk to him about it, but he wasn't interested. Well, please tell me. Producer said, he's been playing that character of a king for so long that he can no longer tell the difference between himself and the character on stage. You got to be kidding me. Can that happen? Oh man, can that happen? It happens all the time. It's going on all the time everywhere around you, but you just don't notice it. You have to see it to believe it. Well, I don't know. I mean, you tell me. I mean, it doesn't help that he's wearing the crown sitting at the table, does it? It's hard to imagine. Producer says, yep. He said, he doesn't know when he's on stage and when he's not. Now, still being very gentle, how many of you wear a particular hat that when you have it on, you are not just typecast, but you are tied into a role that belongs to something that you have been acting out for millennia? Do you understand the question, please? Now, I think I have to put this into context, and I will, because I was trying to, bring you along so that you got interested enough without turning this off too quickly. Mom and dad, if you've ever been a mom or a dad, you know, or just friends to people, you wear a lot of hats, don't you, as a mom or a dad? Yes or no? You go to work, don't you wear a lot of hats? Yes or no? Plumber, chief dishwasher, counselor, webmaster, first hand. You get used to wearing a whole bunch of different hats, and it's quite natural, isn't it? Because life asks you to assume certain roles depending upon the changing conditions in which you find yourself going through. And those circumstances, as they change, if we've ever seen it, which most of us haven't, when the circumstance changes, something to the condition going through some change instantarily produces a change in our character, doesn't it? But we're never aware. This is so important to set the stage. You and I have almost no awareness whatsoever of how immediately a hat shifts because a condition does, and then I'm acting out the role of a character, and I have no idea I'm acting that out. How many of you have seen that with other people? It's really kind of mind-blowing in a way. You can be talking to somebody, you can be on a certain level of a conversation with them, and no more are you on that conversation than something that you say or something that happens. And something like you're talking to somebody, you don't even know who you're talking to anymore. They've changed the subject. You were leading them along waiting for some flattery or something, and they just drifted left or took a hard right, left you standing there. And what happens when somebody doesn't carry out the script that you had in mind for them? What happens to you? You had on one hat, didn't you? You were leading them onto the stage, the spotlight was on you, and then all of a sudden they're reading another script. And what happens to you in that moment? One hat off, another hat on, yes or no? And now you're playing another role, but you didn't see it, is the point. If you could see where you turn from somebody who's trying to be kind into someone who's suddenly sarcastic, you would recognize how in the name of God did this hat go off and that hat come on, and suddenly I'm playing out a character that I wouldn't play if I knew I was playing it out. It's seamless is the point I'm making so far. Yes or no, please? Now, how often do you go to bed with a hat on? How many of you have trouble going to sleep at night? Why? Because you've got a hat on. And it's busy thinking about what it has to think about so that you can take the hat off. Please try to see the picture. A hat goes on as someone who needs everything resolved, and then your mind goes into total conflict trying to resolve a condition that you could never resolve laying in your bed if your life depended on it. And your life does depend upon it, only you don't know it. And then when you wake up in the morning, the first thing that the mind does is what? It looks for a hat. Who will I be today? What do I have to get done? How's that going to work out? God, I had a bad night's sleep, and then you've got grumpy hat on. We're going to talk in a few minutes about hats, okay? How many of you know grumpy hat? Irritable hat. And the thing is, you don't even notice the change. It just like that, seamless. We've been talking about grab eyes, and we've been talking about the stimuli. That grab eye is very similar, isn't it, to the hat that I've got on. I want you to tie this together with me. So now, let's do some work together. And then we're going to come back and visit this list again. Let's make a list of some of the most common familiar hats that we find ourselves wearing. Again, often without any idea that we're doing it. So the heading of the list that you're about to participate in is on the screen. It says, what are some of the hats, some temporary but familiar character you're given to put on in any given moment? And let's stress those words, that you're given to put on. Now, I'm going to prime the list like I like to do, and then I'm going to bring you into it. Let's build a nice big list. Any of you know this hat? Yes. And when that's there, Well, how am I going to stop being poor me? Mind starts running through what it runs through, and then a thought comes, and the next thing you know, I can't do that. That's impossible. I mean, now what's going to happen? And then the next thing, one hat gives way to another hat, gives way to another hat. And nobody knows that their entire character, their plan for the day, the actions they need to take or avoid, has all been determined by the Mad Hatter. Something that is completely unconscious in this mind to how it is responding to the triggers of whatever thoughts or feelings pass through it, and then brings up bit by bit. So I've given you 4. How about apologetic me? The apologetic hat. How many of you know the apologetic hat? Now, when somebody has the apologetic hat on in front of you, do you like that person? But you put it on, don't you? How about the assertive hat? How many of you know the assertive hat? Chris? Yes or no? The assertive hat. We're already starting to getting the loving hat. How about the loving hat? Gag. The sweet, consoling hat. We all have these hats, so the list is starting to build. Let's bring you into the hats. Ellen.
Unappreciated.
Oh my God, the unappreciated hat. John.
Mr. Fix-It.
Mr. Fix-It hat. In other words, know-it-all hat. Other John. Sarcastic hat. I'm a wit. Third John. The resentful hat. Let me get onto the board here. The sky is falling hat. How many of you know the sky is falling hat? Nick says yeah, that's a good one. The desperate hat. Oh, I didn't have that one on my list. The indignant hat. How many of you know the indignant hat? That's very close to the defensive hat, isn't it? Who else? Barbara.
Ingratiating.
The ingratiating, yeah, the peacemaker hat. I'm the master peacemaker. Dana.
The get out of my way pushy hat.
The pushy hat. Get out of my way, I'm coming through. Deb.
Leave me alone.
What was the name of that actress that always did that?
I want to be alone.
Greta Garbo. You know, that is who you are. My God, you even wear your hair like that. Oh my God, I've known it. I told you you were an Academy Award winner, haven't I? Just leave me alone. That's a hat, isn't it? Back to the stage. Holier than thou hat. Patricia.
Complaining hat.
That's a big one. The complaining, the constant complaining hat. Anybody else in the room? Joan.
Justifying.
The justifying hat on the board. The righteousness, the righteous hat. Anybody else in the room? Chris.
Entitled hat.
Big one. The entitled hat, which is very similar to the assertive hat, isn't it? Yes or no? These hats all belong to racks, and the racks all run by a certain similarity. Dana, back to Dana.
The whiner hat.
The whiner hat who loves cheese. Yes, Terry. The enabling hat, yes, which is really, I gotta say yes when I wanna say no hat. I saw a hand over there, Deb.
Irritation.
The irritated hat, the impatient hat. Chica, what about you?
Oh, I was thinking the same thing.
Which one?
Impatient.
Roger.
The rushing.
We have to touch on this one. We're going to get back to it later. The rushing hat, the anxious hat. Yeah? Back to the board. Oh, that's a good one. The martyr hat. Oh, God. Do they know what I've done for them? And you did nothing, by the way, except dream about what you did on the board. The negative, yeah, well, the negative hat pretty much covers all the hats, doesn't it, Patricia?
The judgment hat.
The judgment hat. I know, you don't. End of story. To the board. I'm in charge hat. Chris. Deb, and then we'll have it. We have enough hats, I think.
Pretending you're interested in something.
You don't do that, do you? She said, It's really just the phony hat. I look like I care, but I don't really. But if I don't look like I care, you may not care for me. And I don't really care if you care for me, but I need to think that you do. You get the whole drift there. All right, so that was like, I don't know, maybe 25 good hats. Yes or no? All right. Now, can you see with all of these hats that each and every one of these hats, and please, I want you to see it. I don't want you to think it. Can you see, let's take one of the hats. How about defensive hat? Is there not an immediate posture with a defensive hat? So the body takes on what the hat has on it, doesn't it? How about the apologetic hat? Isn't there an apologetic posture? I want you to start, because we're going to be looking at this. We said that we cannot heal what remains concealed, and we want to learn about what is concealing all of these identities, these grab eyes that pop up, that we summarily find ourselves wearing a hat. We didn't pick that hat. It was picked for us. Something put it on us. We then identify with the hat, and then we act out the role wherever we are with no awareness of what we're doing to ourselves or others as we're acting that out. That's why we're looking at this. So it's important to recognize that every last one of these hats, by its nature, has a posture. Every one of these hats with a posture is divided into two simple categories. There is the, what's the word I want? There is either the passive posture or the aggressive posture. That's it. Those are the two postures of every hat. You can go through this whole list and see that every last one of them is either aggressive, active, or it is passive and retreating. That's the whole limit. It's always binary in terms of the role that a person plays when their consciousness is captured, and on goes this hat, which you'll see is part of the way that we deal with conditions we don't know what to deal with. Something happens, I don't know what to do. Suddenly, ow, I did hurt my head, in case you didn't notice. Suddenly, I've had a reaction and I'm afraid. Now, I didn't suddenly say, I'm afraid. There was a fear, something identified for me, and the next thing I know, I'm acting out what it's like to be fearful or apologetic or any of the other hats that I will not put on the rest of this evening. Now, you can see this. We're looking at characters. We're looking at aspects of these hats, yeah? Now, one reason that we're unaware of these hats, and every hat has a corresponding role, is because even though we don't know it, there is an absolute limited number of characters that are residing in this conditioned consciousness. So that every last one of us, if we were ever able to actually see it, we have in our unconscious closet a limited number of hats that are very common to us given the condition that commands its appearance. One day you will know them quite well because you'll have studied how they appear in you. You'll actually understand. You won't be the actor, the king, the king and I. It'll be you who sees something is trying to put you on the throne that's ultimately a torment to you because you're identified with something from your own past. Following me, please? So that we change all the time. Every change in circumstances, though we don't see it, is an instantaneous corresponding change in the hat. Here's an example. You get up in the morning and you've got on a certain hat, whatever it might be. You've got on the Monday hat, the Monday blues hat. By the time you get to the kitchen, did the Monday blues hat go away when you started making your honey, cinnamon, and toast? Or yes or no? Yeah, chocolate cupcake for breakfast. Now I've got on the chocolate hat. The pleasure hat, which, by the way, nobody mentioned the pleasure hat. And then I'm eating the pleasure, I'm having my pleasure, and while I'm eating it, what hat comes on? Guilt hat. No, please see it. But I don't see the hats change because I never put on the first hat. But I identified with it. That's what the hat was, the Mad Hatter. coming up with a corresponding identity given the condition that I'm in, that is easy for me to fall into that role and just glide along mechanically until, because the condition will change or some thought corresponding to an opposite will pop in and say, you know, you really, 3 cupcakes for breakfast is too much. I heard that this morning. Just kidding. So even as all of that's going on, have you ever noticed it in conversations with others? Yes or no? I'm going to call up my actors to the stage now. I want to exemplify some of this for you so that you can see. Now, this is a bit of improvisation, something we don't usually do here, but I would like to invite everyone at some point to take part in this. This is a big kind of a risk on their part, but they will learn something, and you will all learn something if you pay attention to what transpires, okay? They have their opening instruction, and then you'll see what happens. I'm going to give each one, as they're going through a conversation, a particular hat to wear. Once they put on that hat, they're going to act out that hat. They don't know what the hats are yet. They're going to act out that hat, which will produce a corresponding what in the person they're talking to?
Another hat.
Another hat. And you'll see how this goes. So let's get started.
Okay. So do you remember, honey, one of the best trips that we went on was like when we went back to the East Coast and we went to Maine.
Oh, yeah,
and then and then we went to
Love that
see my
trip.
sister. But you didn't know something, that when we got there, I said, one thing I'm not going to do is get Doug upset, because I know when he drives on unfamiliar roads, he's really, really tense.
Defensive.
What do you mean, upset? I don't get upset when you tell me things. I always accept it gratefully, graciously.
No.
Because I don't really take
Frustrated.
But you don't see it. I mean, but every time that we're driving, like on an unfamiliar freeway, you just get so tense that like it freaks me out.
Apologetic.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't mean to be that way.
Well,
I
you don't
didn't
even-
know it was going to affect you like that.
You don't even notice it. You're just like, so then I'm like scared to say anything.
Supportive.
That's me. That's me. Well, honey, you know what? I'm going to work on that, and I really think you could work on it with me.
Well,
Sarcastic.
yeah, right. Right, you're going to really work on it.
Well,
Now,
then.
we were talking about you.
Oh.
Generally negative.
Negative?
Yeah.
So, you always bring this kind of stuff up, and it bothers me because every time
you just can't
I
take
can't
it.
just go
No,
driving
you are so
somewhere.
sensitive.
Peacemaker.
What?
Peacemaker.
That's you.
I don't think so. I know.
You can't say I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But let's just think about the good things about the trip.
Okay, give him a hand. That was fantastic. I had no idea how that would go. Was that real life? I mean, a little quicker than usual. Now, how are they able to act out those characters? The point is, you see, that each and every person has a closet supplied by the Mad Hatter. Memories that become identities. And all they have to do is be triggered. And the person who's triggered by somebody saying something doesn't know that they took off one hat and put on another. Because when the hat comes off and the other one goes on, who they were the moment before doesn't exist to them anymore, because all that they are in that moment is whatever the hat is they're wearing, whatever that character represents in that moment. Do you see this? Can you see how important it would be for you to start suspecting that this happens all the time? Honest to God, and please, I'll say it strongly if I want to. Most of you, when you're talking to each other, It's like visiting a lunatic place because one person's carrying on a conversation, the other person's weighing and measuring what they're saying. You're not listening. And when you weigh and measure what they're saying, against what are you weighing and measuring what they're saying to you? What does that mean to me? Why are they talking? Have you ever noticed the Mad Hatter? One of the tendencies of the insanity of the actual Mad Hatter was that they were incredibly, what's the word that I want when you're always suspicious? Paranoid. Do you think to yourself that when someone's walking up to talk to you, do you know that there's a hatter inside trying to figure out what they look like, what's their body posture, what's the tone of their voice, and depending upon what condition they present you with, you will find the appropriate hat to respond to that person. Can you see that or not? Now, next, it's important to notice that these hats, I'm not going to do it, that these hats go on and off with the rise of every single curtain. And the curtain's always going up and down as quickly as the conditions are changing in a person's life. So that each changing condition produces a corresponding reaction, and the reaction is basically what determines what that mind reaches for, that hat to put on. And then once it's on, I'll have to do this. Please don't hurt yourself. Once it's on, look, it's on, right? You can see it? What does it say? Now here's what you can't see. When that hat goes on, I can't see squat. All I see is what I'm in. So I have no idea what I'm doing to you or to myself because I am ostensibly blinded by the identification with any of these characters or qualities that are pulled out of this consciousness by any condition that triggers that condition nature waiting, by the way, to reiterate itself. Because if you could see it, we went through the list. We're going to go back and visit it for an important second part of the list. But when it's suddenly coming up, just like that, it's like the gears of a machine. We just don't see it. Go back to Doug and Barbara. She's saying something, what happens? It triggers some resistance in him. The minute the resistance is triggered, what takes place next? The resistance, suddenly I've got this pain, I feel a problem, I'm pushing back. A reaction needs to define it, doesn't it? So up comes a reaction, and that reaction, for all intents and purposes, tells me who I am. It is my hat. It's defining who I am, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to say. And there is no other field other than what has that whole consciousness has been collapsed into the content of whatever that particular reaction is. Do you see that? Yes or no? So that momentary identity is chosen for me. That's the whole point I'm getting to. We think, I covered this on Sunday. I think I'm active when I'm negative. Don't you? When I'm defensive or angry or frightened, I think I'm active. I'm the furthest thing from active there is. Instead, my consciousness being acted on something and its conditioned response is always passive. Reactions are always passive. Write it down so you never forget it. When you have a reaction, it's a passive response to a condition. If it's a passive response, but it gives me an identity that then I act from, I think the reaction has given me a character to be and to follow through and to ensure that I get through the fear or the problem that I'm reacting to. And it's impossible because the passive response to the condition ensures that the condition defines me. And when the condition defines me, what are my choices that the hat allows? None. Literally a binary set of choices relative to each and every one of those many characters or qualities that we went through together. Everybody still tracking with me? All right. So, all right. to look at my time. What are we going to do? I have to kind of get to the exercise part. I've described the problem, haven't I? How many of you know it's a fact? And that it's concealed. You can even suspect it, but now the point being that we've put some flesh on those invisible bones so that maybe we can start from time to time to see the skeleton when it comes out of the closet and recognize, you know what, I'm about to take on one of these characters. I'm about to put on my hat. Know-it-all hat. Gabby hat. Gossip hat. What are we going to do? We need to find out what's concealed. We need to understand where it's concealed. What is it that causes that hat to appear? And if I can find out what causes that hat to appear, and that I know it blinds me when I do, how am I going to understand who or what is creating that hat? You got the question? You ready? Write this down. You have to look inside the hat to see who manufactured it. Well, it was made somewhere. You didn't make the hat. Would you ever make a torment hat? Would you? How about a hate hat? Would you make a hate hat? Would you? You know I'm going to go through this till enough of you start saying something out loud. Would you make a complaining hat? And yet I got one on. I'm gagging on my own sad sack apologetic nature, walking backwards all the time so people won't hurt me. Would I put on that hat if I knew I was putting it on? How am I going to know who puts it on? I just told you. I have to find out by looking to see the manufacturer. And it's always going to say, made in unconsciousness. You heard of made in China? Yeah. This is made in unconsciousness, and here's the rest of the part and the exercise. Made in consciousness by, and that's what you have to discover, is what is actually creating, manufacturing that hat and its corresponding identity. We're going to examine it for a minute. Then if we have time, we're going to go back and look at our list, and I'm going to invite you to do what I'm going to do for you right now. So, suddenly I have on the defensive hat. Now, I didn't see myself put it on. You came up to me and you basically, like said, I made a mistake. You asserted that I could have done something wrong. The hat of disbelief, by the way. Now, if I take this hat off and I look inside to see who manufactured it, it says, made in unconsciousness by. What makes me defensive? Is it you that makes me defensive? What makes me defensive? An image of myself as being someone beyond doubt. So I can't get defensive without believing somehow or other I'm beyond correction. I am about as perfect as a human being. Now, you don't walk around, I hope to God you don't. You don't walk around going, I'm so perfect. It's unbelievable. Do you do that? If you do, you need to check out of here and go, I got a place up north where you put on funny suits. No, I don't do that, but all of a sudden, I'm absolutely on the defensive. Now, ordinarily when I'm on the defensive, do I think to myself that somehow or other I am complicit with the conflict that's existing in this moment between us? Or having the hat on and fully assuming the role, am I not given by that hat, that role, everything that affirms why it is that I have every right to be defensive? Yes or no? Yes. But if I look inside the hat, what do I see? Complicity. I can't avoid it. Ow! The sacrifices I'm making for you today. What hat do I have on? Now, I'm sitting at home, and I look at the news. I look in the mirror and see my face. Could be anything. And suddenly, I have a hat on, don't I? Anxious. Now, when I have this hat on, the hat, meaning the consciousness that produced the hat where it was manufactured, is telling me, look, it is very natural for you to be afraid right now. You would be insane if you weren't worried about this. I mean, my God. And then that stimuli goes on and begins to describe every corresponding reason why I have to be and do what this hat is telling me I have become, yes or no. So I've been doing that my whole life. Human beings have been doing this their entire existence. Because in case you didn't notice going through that long list, was there anything anyone said of a hat that you don't have and put on from time to time? So I got on the fearful hat. Oh. I'm losing my mind hat. If I never look inside the hat, will I ever know that I'm defined by something that has reacted to a moment that isn't the cause of the fear at all? I'll never know. I have to look inside the hat, don't I? And what does it say? First part? Made in unconsciousness. And then, why am I suddenly wearing the fearful hat? Who makes the fear? You can make a list for yourself depending on your character. My sense of security is wrapped up in the way you treat me. If you don't treat me that way, I have to be afraid because it means you don't love me anymore. My sense of security is wrapped up in a certain amount of dollars and cents that I've got. And when it goes up, I'm delighted, and when it downs, I'm full of fear. And therefore, I believe that the only thing I can do when I'm full of fear is I've got to protect at all costs what I believe, listen to this, is making me fearless. And so looking in the hat, I start to realize, wait a minute, what I think is making me fearless is actually the cause of my fear. That's how you reveal this concealed consciousness and begin through the revelation to recognize any response that I have born out of this sudden identity, this hat that I've got on, does not belong to me because it's not my hat. It feels like mine. I've put it on my whole life. Haven't you put it on your whole life? How about that sweetie pie hat? Another gag. Well, no, so many of us, I know for myself, I cannot tell you how many years I was practiced at making people like themselves by finding some way to draw out of them something that they like to see or feel. So that the hat I would have on was the motive hat. I'm going to give a whole talk on motives. We never see the motive hat. All we see is what the motive tells us we need to do to move that person so they'll be what we want them to be when we want them to be like that. Every last one of these hats needs to be taken off when it comes on. I call these things hotum, hotum, whatever word you want. H-O-T-M, write it down. What does H-O-T-M stand for? Hat of the moment. And did you know that as long as you're in thought, you always have a hat on? The reason you're in thought is because there's a hat that can't take itself off, and it's trying to figure out what to do with itself. Only when a person begins to understand that their relationship to the moment, however it is being defined. Let's take another example, and then we got a couple minutes. I'm going to bring you inside. How many of you know the get it planned hat? Yes or no? Think it through hat. Now, is that pleasurable or painful? It's pain, but when I'm doing it, I'm not aware of the pain, am I? I'm sitting there, make this list, get this thing, get this right, so that by the time I'm done, I'm too tired to do anything on the list. I've worn myself out with anxiety. And what does that mean? If I take off the get it done list and I look inside, Made where? Made in unconsciousness by what? Anxiety. Made by FOMO. There's the rushing hat, right? I got the rushing hat on. I'm anxious. Why am I rushing? Why am I anxious? I never know. All I'm concerned with is getting to the place the hat tells me I have to get to so I can take the hat off, put on the at peace hat. What's it? If you take off the rushing hat, the anxious hat, and you look inside the label, what does it say? What does it say? Made in unconsciousness by whom? Fear of missing out. Why do you think you rush? Rushing is a form of greed. I'm going to stay here as long as I can, get everything I've done here, then I'm going to get there and I'm going to get that done. Fear is behind rushing. Always. Now, if I actually knew that I had on the rushing hat, the anxious hat, and I was just interested to recognize, I can feel this hat. See, that's one of the problems, isn't it? Like if you put a hat on and you wear a hat your whole life, you almost never know you have a hat on. We almost never know we have a hat on. Because our head is so used to carrying the weight of those thoughts and feelings and the reactions they cause, the conflict with others. What if this hat said love? And then somebody I'm talking to doesn't agree that I'm the loving person that I think I am. What happens to the love hat? What happens to it? Becomes resentment hat, doesn't it? Becomes enemy hat. This is what I want you to see. Instead of always identifying with whatever the conditions are that are corroborating the hat you've got on, I want you to begin to recognize that in those moments that the hat you've got on has a label inside. The task is to recognize the hats on. How many of you think you can start recognizing, at least look from time to time? If you could catch 3 hats in a day, it would be a hat trick. You think I'm kidding? You'll be lucky if you catch 3 hats in a day. That's how seamless they're changing, shifting. But if I could catch one of them and actually recognize, wait a minute, whatever this is I'm acting out, these thoughts and feelings, whatever it is that's pouring through me, if I had my choice, would I go through this? Would I do this? And then the hat, the talking hat, the mad hatter will start talking to you. It'll start telling you why you have to pay attention to what the hat is defining you as being. You'll literally, for the first time in your life, hear the mad hatter. And when you start to hear the mad hatter, I told you the fact that what was concealed now being revealed has its own action in it. You'll be shocked. Something is actually explaining to me why I have to feel this fear. It's telling me that it's necessary for me to be happy. Imagine, something is telling me it's necessary for me to have an enemy to be at peace with myself next week. So we've got about 4 minutes. Let's go back, if we'll bring up that list, our long list, if we can, Eric. And anybody pick one of the terms on that. Get rid of the list heading now. I just want to see the names. Roll down, please. Pick one. Somebody pick a hat and then tell me what's on the inside of the hat. Anybody? Let's pick resentful. Here I am, I'm resentful. What's on the inside of the hat? Made in unconsciousness, and who's the maker? Expectation. Look, there's no wrong answer here, is there? The fact is to recognize that something has come over me. It's blinding me to everything other than what I see is the necessity of my state. And now I want to look inside. I want to look in the hat. I want to see who made this thing. And now I can see it. I'm resentful because I expected you to be other than you were. So it isn't that you did what you did. All you did was show me and put on this hat, and I thank you for it. Because I take my hat off to you. Literally, I take my hat off to you. Pick another one, please. Complaining. I got the complaining hat on. I take off first of all, what a miracle it would be if, please God, that any of you actually catch the complaining hat and you dare to take it off and look inside. Made in unconsciousness, who's the maker? Who's the Mad Hatter that makes the complainer hat? I know how things should be. You can't complain about a condition without knowing how that condition's supposed to be. So really the know-it-all, which is a hat, has made the complainer hat. You'll see all the hats are connected. They're all made out of the same material, the same dark weave. Pick another one. Peacemaker. I got the peacemaker hat on. How many of you know what the peacemaker is? Basically, we talked about it a little earlier. Peacemaker is someone who can't stand anybody else's negativity. That's what the peacemaker is. Not somebody that's loving and kind and all the rest of that garbage, but someone who cannot bear the manifestation of another person. So if I take off the hat of the peacemaker and I look inside, it says, made in unconsciousness, who's the maker?
Fear.
Fear would be one. How about my inability to deal with my own pain? I don't know what to do with this. Made in unconsciousness by something that has no idea what to do with its pain. Now I have some semblance of responsibility, don't I? And I can begin to do what? Take the hat off. And by the way, when you take it off, walk off the stage. You take that hat off, you drop it on the ground. How many of you have always wanted to be the person who dropped the mic? I know, John. Yes, John. I can't wait for my moment. Drop my golf club, drop my hat, drop the hat. Why would I drop the hat? I was attached to it a moment or so before, wasn't I? Why would I drop the hat? Because I see who made it. And guess who made it? Something I didn't know about myself. An unconscious nature made that hat. And I put it on because it said I needed it. Now I see I need this like a hole in my head, which is quite apt for my talk tonight. What am I doing? Take the hat off, drop the hat, and then what? Because this is critical. You start to even drop the hat. What's the Mad Hatter going to do? You kidding me? You're going to let him get away with that, right, Babs? Yeah, you're going to. You're not going to stand up for yourself here. Do you know what'll happen if you don't stand up for yourself? You got to be kidding me. You will hear those voices and others, and if you're persistent, they will scream at you. And then you'll know the insanity of the Mad Hatter, and you'll no longer want anything to do with that consciousness, which is the same as beginning to die to yourself. What's the exercise? Catch the hat, take it off, look inside. Who manufactured it? We know that, made in unconsciousness. And then your own perception, your own intuition will show you, I am, in fact, this consciousness is complicit in making this character, and I drop the hat, and what do? Walk off the stage. God, I hope I can hear at least one report on Sunday about somebody who caught the Mad Hatter, took off the hat, recognized this long-standing relationship in their own complicity with their suffering, and want to bring an end to it. Good session. Let's take a break. We'll come back and have our dialogue.